So we're at our virtual training, and this is part A. We are using a platform called WEBEX Events. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's sort of like Zoom, but as you can see, not quite as easily used. Everyone that is an attendee is going to be muted, and you do not have video. You may see the video of the stream team staff that are also indicated as host and panelist over in the right-hand side. If you have any questions or anything to point out to us, just utilize the chat feature, and we'll try to get to those as we can. So here is what you probably see on your screen, hopefully. Over here on the right-hand side, over here on the right-hand side, you will see that there is a feedback button. It looks like a little megaphone, and using this feedback option, you can ask us to speed up, slow down, give applause. Just let us know how you're feeling as we're presenting. More importantly, down here, we also have this chat box. Some of you have already found it this morning and gave it a try. The chat box, you can send a chat to everyone. You will have to select who you're sending it to. So select either everyone or to panelists or just a select panelist. Again, the panelists are stream team staff. I cannot see the chat as I'm presenting, but there are other people that are on the call that are covering those as they pop up. If I happen to see them, I'll try to address them here, but otherwise expect a response within the chat box. Again, this is being recorded and will be available on the website after we are done. Okay, today we are going to be covering the welcome and intro, and this is just introducing you to the stream team program and to the volunteer water quality monitoring program. We're also going to help you identify a quality site to be monitoring and all the parameters to look at and to consider when you're picking that site, and then also how to measure stream discharge. At the end of each of the chapters, except for the welcome and intro, we will have a small poll. This is more or less just a quiz without the points, and this is to gauge how well everyone is understanding what we're presenting and also give us opportunity to address some more questions. We will also provide breaks after each of the chapters. And once more, please use that chat box if you have any questions. As an introductory train monitor, you will be able to select a site, collect stream discharge, and also collect biological data. And the biological data are the macroinvertebrates, which tend to be a favorite of a lot of folks. And that is going to be presented in Part B. The Part B that I will be teaching is this Thursday, and we also have opportunities to attend the live training next month and the following for those as well. If you have not already, we have the educational resources available on the website. The most helpful are going to be, of course, the notebook and the PowerPoint. Within the notebook, PowerPoints are listed. We have made a few changes to them, so the most updated PowerPoint is just a PDF document listed on our website. Tomorrow, you will probably want to reference some of the macroinvertebrate resources. We also have a lot of images on there, a lot of cool stuff to learn. If you happen to be a teacher, a lot of our teachers like to use these in their classroom as well. And I think Jenna is going to drop this link into the chat box if you haven't already referenced them. And that way you can check them out, take notes, whichever you like on your way through the training. Okay, in this chapter, we are going to talk about the stream team program, the volunteer water quality monitoring program, which we also refer to as VWQM. And then we're going to define watersheds and why they're important and why it's important to take a watershed approach when you're trying to take care of your stream. All right, Missouri Stream Team Program. We are actually a partnership between the Missouri Department of Conservation, the Conservation Federation of Missouri, and the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. While the biggest component of this, though, is going to be our volunteers. The Stream Team program has three main goals. We have stewardship, advocacy, and education. Advocacy is mostly handled by Stream Teams United. You may have heard of them before, but they are a nonprofit that is one of our partners, and they do most of the advocacy work. Stewardship could be something like doing the water quality monitoring or picking up litter, doing tree plantings, being really hands-on, taking care of the stream. And then, of course, the education feature is teaching people about stream health, why it's important, why we need to be taking care of these resources. And I don't know if you guys have heard of the Stream Team program, but we have a lot of things that you can do. A lot of times people ask, is this, can we count this as volunteer time with Stream Team? Basically, anything you do is in a watershed and it helps out streams, so probably yes. So here is a list of all of the Stream Team activities that we have listed on our activity reports. And of course, there's some stuff that falls in between them. Most people are familiar with litter pickup. Sometimes you might be familiar with Adopt and Access. These folks help keep our fishing accesses and boat accesses cleaned up. Planting trees, storm drain stenciling. There is just one of these activities that requires training, and that is water quality monitoring that we are doing here today. So let's talk about it a little bit further. The Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program started back in 1993. This was about 5 years after the birth of the Stream Team program. Some of the Stream Team volunteers said, hey, we want to do more with actually checking on the real health of the stream. We want to do some kind of monitoring. So this started back in 1993, and we have a lot of monitors that have been active ever since the beginning of this program. The program goals of VWQM are inform and educate, establish a monitoring network. And this is mostly volunteers working together. Once you start doing Stream Team activities, you will learn that it is a giant family, no matter where you are at in the state. You think about whenever you say, hey, I like to float on the Niangua River. And then you have all these other people speak up and say, hey, I also like the Niangua River. Well, guess what? Now you have this whole new network of people that care about this one resource. So that's something that we really promote, is our volunteers networking together to make an even stronger program and better streams. Another program goal is to enable informed decision making. And this could be just collecting some baseline data. So if MoDOT's going to be putting in a bridge, they have good baseline data to build off of. Also with legislation, a lot of different groups will reach out to Department of Natural Resources, say, hey, what kind of data do you have on this watershed? Because we're going to be talking about building in this area. So we want to make sure that we're having good decision making that all kind of starts with us, that also roots back to inform and educate. Ultimately, our big goal is to halt water quality degradation. The VWQM program is split up into 4 levels of training. What everyone here today is sitting in is our introductory, also referred to as intro or introduction to VWQM. In this level, there are no prerequisites. All that we care is that you want to learn about streams. So in this level, we learn how to select a site, measure stream discharge, and collect macroinvertebrate data, and that's biological data. And then in level 1 is where we learn how to do chemistry. The big chemistry parameters are dissolved oxygen, nitrate, pH, conductivity, temperature, and transparency. And we also learn how to do something called visual survey, which is just looking at your stream and taking a physical assessment on how it looks and how it changes over time. Level 2, you don't learn anything new. We kind of go more in depth on the topics, but really this is a quality control, quality assurance workshop where we make sure that the methods are correct and that equipment is still functioning as it should. Our most elite of monitors are level 3. This is another QA/QC training. But this is an audit at the monitor stream site. So this is a one-on-one. You have to submit 12 sets of data. And at this one of our program staff meets the monitor at the site, and they run through the entire test together and just make sure it's accurate. For level 2 and level 3, you do have to recertify every few years, but for introductory and level 1, there's not a recertification required. All right, so what is water quality? All right, when we talk about water quality, we are referring to the physical part of it. And this is how it looks, how it behaves. And this is not only just the stream where the water's flowing, but it's the entire watershed. Water quality also refers to the biological life. Specifically, our program is looking at the benthic macroinvertebrate, so the critters that crawl along the bottom, also referred to as fish food. But those, I think, are probably the most fun for people to learn. And then, of course, water quality also refers to the chemical aspects. Again, these are temperature, DO, or dissolved oxygen, pH, nutrients, and dissolved and suspended solids. We'll talk a lot more on chemistry in level 1. Usually we offer those in fall, although we haven't planned for anything yet with this new virtual format. So let's talk about Missouri water quality. There is a Stream Teams United put out a summary of data for Missouri Stream Team VWQM data. And this is all data that's collected between 1993, that's when the program started, all the way up until 2016. This document is available on Stream Teams United website. I think one of our panelists can probably drop that into the chat in case you were interested in seeing that. But this water quality data showed that in the Plains region, that is up north, where the streams are a lot slower moving. It's not always that super pristine habitat that we envision. Not that it's bad, but it's just different habitat. And this is how they fare. They are the ones that are in blue. We have most of them are actually in fair or poor by how we calculate the standards for water quality monitoring. But 14% of them are in excellent condition. And then for the Ozarks, these are the float streams that most people are familiar with. This is the majority of Missouri. It's the entire region here that's tan. And 41% of these are considered in excellent condition. So what makes it excellent or what makes it poor? Okay, from DNR standpoint, which is Department of Natural Resources, it can be deemed impaired for its use. Okay, if it is a stream that is intended for swimming or full body contact, then the water quality of that stream needs to be able to support that activity. Some streams are also, it can be drinking water or for agricultural use. So the stream itself has to be appropriate in water quality for that use. Okay, and why there are reasons for our streams to be more polluted, and that could be because of point source pollution or non-point source pollution. Point source pollution, that's the easy stuff. These you can always identify because there is a pipe discharging out of either a facility or out of a bank. And these usually require a permit, so DNR knows exactly what's coming out of those pipes or what is supposed to be coming out of those pipes. But then we also have non-point source pollution, and that's the challenging one. I did see a chat just pop up asking, is the reason because of agriculture? Well, agriculture, along with a lot of other stuff, can fall under the non-point source pollution. And this is just the combination of runoff sources. So this is whatever is running over the landscape, and it's a combination, not just one thing. So it's difficult to ID and difficult to control. So let's look a little bit more about what non-point source pollutions are. In the agricultural realm, this could just be sediment. Maybe the land is too bare, so nothing's there to hold on to the soil, so it's getting washed away. This could be fertilizers, pesticides, and animal waste. If you ever look at the nutrients that's in a stream that has cattle access, it's going to be a lot higher than an area that does not have cattle access. In an urban stream, you also have some of the same non-point source pollutions, but also some different ones as well. Again, we have sediment. Whenever you're mowing your grass really, really short, there's not much that's going to be holding on to that dirt. You have your residential folk that they also use fertilizers and pesticides. They also have animal waste, but it's more in the form of your dog waste. Sometimes you have your chickens as well, but a lot of it is your pet waste. Urban areas also have cleaning products, such as when you wash your car, when you wash your house, when you're washing your windows, you're power washing off your driveway. And speaking of driveway, that also kind of takes us to impervious surfaces. These are your roads, your sidewalks, your roofs, anything that water cannot penetrate through. So you think about that great big parking lot at that big box store, all that water that hits that parking lot and everything that's on that parking lot, the heavy metals from the vehicles, the oils, the trash, all of that runs off. And it typically runs off into a storm drain, which those storm drains go into the stream, okay? So it's a lot of stuff that goes into it. All right, let's talk about the benefits of monitoring. The biggest thing that we really say it's great is collecting baseline data. So this is data that's not necessarily going out and showing anything grand, but it's just collecting where our streams are normally at. So if a pollution event happens, we can look back and say, this is where it's supposed to be at, and this is where we're at now after this event happened. And the same thing goes if there is some kind of a land development, a new bridge going in, they always look at the baseline data. Where was it? Where should it be? Our monitors can also provide long-term trends. So maybe in a given watershed, over time, the riparian area has been decreased. We're losing vegetation, we're losing trees, and that's affecting a lot of the chemical parameters. And so that's going to be a long-term trend. When we say long-term, we mean 5 years or more. Now, we totally understand life happens. Many of you are just volunteers. You're not going to be getting paid through your jobs to collect this data. So we understand that sometimes you can't collect 5 years or longer, and that's okay. But that would be our goal, is at least 5 years of data, if possible, for a given site. Many of our monitors, they're out there looking to find problems. Their area that they adopted might be because they are concerned about something there at that site. We hope that you don't actually go out and find problems, but sometimes you do. Of course, we do want to generate data. Myself, I love data. I could just sit there and stare at it. And especially whenever you get it into a graph, you can actually visualize it. It just gives me those warm fuzzies. And I'm sure there are other people that are listening in on this thinking the same thing. And of course, we want to protect our watersheds. So how do we use the data? And this is the biggest question that gets asked, is what are we doing with this data once it comes into us? Because you will go out and you'll collect this data and it will be sent into Department of Natural Resources with our partners there. And this data goes into a database. Well, what happens to it from there? So of course we can use this for just general education and advocacy. We have lots of teachers, everywhere from elementary up through college and graduate school that are using stream team methods and stream team data just to help educate students. We already harped a lot on baseline data and why it's so important, and IDing those long-term trends, locating those problems. Another one is for screening potential problems. What if a monitor goes out to a stream site and they do find a problem, a really big problem. You know, you might have that one pipe discharge that's discharging something they're not supposed to, and it's identified by a volunteer. Well, this information comes into your partners with DNR, and DNR will screen it to say if they need to send out professional monitors to come out and follow up on that. And that way nothing comes back onto our volunteers. You know, if something ends up in court, we don't want our volunteers to have to go in there. And so this is, you know, all of the issues that do come up are going to be handled by agency staff. And you can also see what is actually going on with the streams by looking at the 303D list and the 305B water quality report. Both of these are available on the DNR website. They're actually very, very interesting to read, especially for those people that like data. But the list of impaired waters are going to be stream sections, not an entire stream, but stream sections that are impaired for their designated use. So I said just a little bit ago, if it's a designated use for drinking water, it may be impaired for drinking water. Still totally fine to swim in, but it's not appropriate to be drinking. Okay, and then you also have the 305B water quality report that is submitted to EPA that you can also reference on that site. You know, you'll be able to find information on what the water quality chemical parameters should be, what the normal ranges should be here in the state. Of course, we do have aquatic education. We want people to be able to use this information, teach each other, and just spread the knowledge. And then for the Missouri Department of Conservation, we also have what we call priority watersheds. So there are opportunities for our monitors to collect data to help DNR staff and to also help MDC staff. Okay, and these are just a few examples of our real life volunteers collecting data that really found something grand to help us help the streams. So up in Francis Howell High School, this is in St. Charles County, the students were actually out measuring, I think it was during winter time, but they found that the chloride level or the conductivity level was way higher than it normally is. And so they kept going further upstream until they found that there was a sewer line break that was releasing sewer line water that of course was a lot higher in conductivity than what it should have been in the natural setting. And it was just low enough that it hadn't been detected yet. So they were able to get that reported and get that repaired. The Clark family farm discovered a local pool draining into the stream. And they did this because, of course, they were out there sampling routinely like usual, and the stream was way higher than what it should have been. And I don't mean like it was flooding, but it was not normal and what to be expected at this little wadeable stream. So they also went upstream to see what was going on and found that their local pool was just emptying at the end of the summer straight into the stream. This can cause fish kills. This can kill off all the invertebrates. It makes the chloride levels go screaming high. It's not good for the stream. And then in the St. Louis area, we have a couple of teams that their big focus is on road salt application. So they're looking at conductivity and chloride levels, especially in the summertime. If anyone is interested in that type of project, you can put that in the chat and we can try to get you in touch with the folks that are actually out there running these big programs, because they have lots of volunteers that are helping them. You've heard me say the word watershed a few times, and you may or may not know what this is. So let's go ahead and define it. Go ahead and entertain me here. I can't see you, so I can't see, you know, if you feel ridiculous doing this, no one's judging you. So if you take your hands, cup them together like this. Now imagine if you put your hands underneath the faucet, all the water is going to flow down into that little crook in the palm of your hand. You just made a tiny watershed. So a watershed is a topographically defined area that drains into a single body. This could be into a lake, it could be into a bay, it could be into a stream. Most often, of course, when we're talking about it, it's draining into a stream or a large river. These can also be referred to as a drainage basin or a catchment area. Here is another visualization of what a watershed could be. The yellow dotted line that is right here is going to be the hilltops, the mountaintops. And of course, water flows downhill. So if you're on this side of that divide, all this water is flowing into this watershed right here. So it's all kind of come into these tributaries, into the main stream or the main stem of this little river, and then down into this bay, okay? Whatever the bear is doing in the woods on the other side of this divide is not necessarily affecting this watershed. Of course, you know, just like whenever you learn things in elementary school and then in high school and then in college, you learn that you don't know all of it and it kind of changes. And yes, the bear can actually affect water quality on this side, but generally speaking, this bear is in a different watershed, and all these farms and homes and factories, all this stuff is in a different watershed and they're a little bit separate. If you guys have any questions on any of this, please ask it in the chat. I'm trying to monitor as they pop up for a split second to see if I can further explain any of this and just to make sure everyone understands it. Okay, so we did the exercise with our hands that showed a teeny tiny watershed. But watersheds can be large. In this example here, we can see that there is the Mississippi River watershed. There's a Missouri River watershed, the Tennessee Basin, Ohio. Watersheds can be huge, but we're not at all going to be expecting our volunteers to go out there and monitor, you know, with the large picture of the Mississippi River watershed. That is way too overwhelming. So we're going to start breaking it down little by little until we get to a manageable size for our monitors. All right, so these right here are the big watersheds that, that touch Missouri in some way. The biggest one is going to be the Mississippi River watershed. And you can see the watersheds that make up the Mississippi River watershed. These are also referred to as sub-watersheds. The Mississippi River watershed drains 1.2 million square miles. That is a lot. Go ahead and if you have your chat open, drop in the chat what ranking you think the Mississippi River watershed is worldwide for size. Is it number 1 for being the largest, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 10? All right, so I see someone voted that's the highest. Another one for number 2, second or third, we're getting closer. Number 7, that's a little bit over it. Number 4, all right, there's our right answer. It is actually the 4th largest watershed in the world, okay? This comes behind the Amazon, the Congo, and I think the Nile. Please someone correct me if that third one is not right. So with this being such a large watershed, this covers 30 states in the United States and also a part of Canada. So what this shows us is the watersheds don't care about political boundaries. You know, if we feel one way about our water and another state or another country feel differently, well, they all kind of play together. And that's why we end up with problems like the dead zone down here in the Gulf of Mexico, okay? Because we're all working on the same project, but not everyone has the same goals or values. All right, so we're going to focus in a little bit smaller. Now we are looking at the Missouri River watershed. This drains a little bit over 500,000 square miles. This covers 10 states in the US and that little tiny bit of Canada, which is not displaying in this photo. And this is actually the longest river in North America. I will bet that at some point you're going to come across another stream team person that thinks that the Mississippi River Basin should have been called the Missouri River Basin, since the Missouri River is technically longer than the Mississippi River. It's a huge debate, but it's only by like several miles, not very much. All right, so we're going to zoom in a little bit more. And now we are looking just at the state of Missouri. So the watersheds in Missouri. This grayish green area is the part of the Missouri River watershed that is in Missouri. Water is going to be flowing south and east. So it goes this way before it comes into the Mississippi and flows south all the way down to the Gulf. And at this size, it's still too large for our volunteers to be monitoring. So we're going to just pick a site, and we're going to be coming back and referencing this one location throughout the whole training. So you see this little red dot down here. This is our sampling site. Okay, so we break down the Missouri River watershed into smaller sub-watersheds, and our sampling site is now down here in the Gasconade River watershed. Okay, so now we're zoomed in on that. Our sampling site is still right here, this red dot. And we can break this up even further. So now we're the Gasconade sub-watershed. And what we actually want to be looking at is what is now grayed out. This is the Ruby Dew watershed. The site that we have selected is actually on the Ruby Dew Creek. This is where the very first stream team started. So this site, of course, is very important to us. And this is the network of streams that make up this watershed. Your site is going to be at the lowest point within that watershed, so water is actually flowing north in this system. And there's our site. Okay, so that was just to demonstrate that we can focus in smaller for our watersheds. It really just kind of focuses with a lot more laser point for what our efforts are going to be and what our concerns should be. All right, so we all live in a watershed. We all play in a watershed. We all work in watersheds. You know, the watersheds are going to be a reflection. Our streams are going to be a reflection of our watershed. So if we go out and we monitor and our streams are great, they are super healthy, then it's a pretty good indication our entire watershed is going to be healthy. And then, of course, if we have a stream that is in really poor condition, well, there's probably a lot of stuff going on in this watershed that's contributing to that. And so having that laser focus on a smaller watershed is where this really helps us out. Okay, we can get a lot more traction this way. I'm going to start, and I'm just going to tell you who I am. I'm April Sevy. I work with the Missouri Department of Conservation as the Volunteer Water Quality and Monitoring Coordinator. I am here today with Jenna, Amy, Chris, Kat, Lynn, and Randy. They also work with the Stream Team program. And I think we have just a few extra minutes. Do you guys want to introduce yourself, other Stream Team staff? I can kind of call on you guys and you can just quickly say what you're over. We can start here with Jenna. Jenna, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Jenna Steek. I am part of the Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program, and I am part of the Stream Team. I'm over the Southeast region.
Hello, Amy Meyer. I am the Stream Team biologist that helps coordinate stream teams for what we call the Missouri River Unit, which is pretty much the northern part of the state. And I also do the channel's newsletter and some of the social media stuff as April does as well.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Riggert. I'm the Stream Team Coordinator for the Conservation Department. I oversee the program as a whole and have regional responsibilities in St. Louis.
Hey everybody, I'm Kat Lackman. I am the Stream Team biologist that cover the Ozark and Southwest regions for MDC. I'm also kind of the go-to IT person and deal a lot with our Stream Team website and the database that you guys submit data to and any of our activity reports.
Hey guys, I'm Laura and I work with the Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program, and I deal a lot with the data that if you all collect, I can review your data and set you up.
Yes, Laura is the person whenever you submit data. If there's any follow-up needed, you will probably be hearing from her.
Hey everybody, good morning. My name is Lynn Milberg. I am with the Department of Natural Resources and I head up their water quality monitoring section. And so we are part of the DNR folks that will likely go out and do some of the follow-up monitoring if any of your data were to show some potential issues.
Randy Sarver. I work for the Department of Natural Resources as a volunteer water quality monitoring coordinator and work with training and more advanced projects.
Hi, I'm Robert Voss with the Department of Natural Resources. So my unit has Laura in it, but we also deal with the 303D and 305B report that April mentioned earlier. So all of the data that gets generated by both the volunteers and department, federal and local governments, all that kind of stuff, we collate all that data, go through and assess it, and generate those list of impaired waters, as well as update the status of all the waters in the state.
Asking about wastewater operator credits. For those operators that are attending for your credits, you have to attend Part A and Part B. So on after Part B is completed on Thursday, we'll give you some instruction during that presentation to get your information to make sure that you do get credit on there. If you are a wastewater operator on here, if you want to send a quick chat to Laura Richardson under the panelist, and just make sure she has your name. That way she can go ahead and get things started for you because she'll be collecting that information Thursday. And again, that's Laura Richardson who will be collecting that information. All right, let's go ahead and get started back up on this. The very first part, whenever you are monitoring, of course, is selecting your monitoring site. You might wonder if you should go collect it or figure this out on your own. If we have somewhere we need to send you, more often than not, we're just letting our volunteers pick a site that's important to them. You're kind of on your own with it unless you need some additional help. Of course, we are here to help you out, but some of you might already have your site picked out on where you want to monitor at, but there are still some things to consider to make sure that it's going to be appropriate for monitoring. So in this chapter, we are going to talk about factors to consider when picking your site, how to identify the site to Stream Team staff so we know where to put this data. And then we also have this great resource at your first sampling site that is the initial site selection form, and we'll go over that form as well. Choosing a site, how do I decide? And this is always the biggest question during this part of the presentation. So pick a site that is important to you. Maybe you want to learn the condition of a local stream, one that flows through the park, through your back door. It might be your favorite recreational stream, where you like to fish at, where you like to swim, where you like to go paddling. Maybe it's a place that has pollution concerns. There might be a CAFO going in your county, and you think that you might want to start monitoring your streams just to make sure that they aren't negatively affected by that CAFO going in. And it might also be a priority for state agencies. Again, I'm going to reference the MDC priority watersheds. These fisheries biologists, they do collect some of their own data, but they also recruit the help of some volunteers to help them monitor some of their sites, or they might just pick data from some of these people that are already monitoring on these sites. And you might also be able to bridge a monitoring gap. We have our Stream Team interactive map on the website at mostreamteam.org, and this will show you where there is data at. And so you might want to just bridge that gap, like, hey, there's no one monitoring around here, so that might be why you pick that site. Here is an image of what that map looks like. Jenna just dropped it into the chat box. Again, you can just access this on our website. When you first go there, there's going to be two different icons. You're going to have the blue and green Stream Team logo, and that just identifies there is some kind of Stream Team activity that happened there. So it could be water quality monitoring, but it could also be a litter pickup that happened at that site. These little black and white icons is the same icon that's down here in this lower right-hand corner of my screen, and that's our bug in the bottle VWQM logo. Wherever you see these on the map, there is data associated with it. So you can click on the icon, you can click on the button that says more data, and it'll actually take you to the data that's available for the site. An important thing to look for is when was the last data collected? Because we might have an icon down here in the boot heel where you're wanting to monitor at, and you think, I can't monitor there, someone's already there. But the data may not have been collected in the past 20 years. So it's an open site. No one else is actively monitoring on it. So look at the date whenever you're looking at these sites as well. Okay, of course, there are some factors to consider. Not all streams are created equal. You may have heard the different types of streams, such as perennial, ephemeral, and intermittent. Our protocols are designed for perennial streams. These are streams that contain water all year round. Even during the most dry seasons, there was at least a pool there, if not flowing water. And the big reason for this is that the biological life that we are looking at often spends at least a year in the water. They can spend up to 4 years in the water before they emerge as adults. And so they're not going to be there if the water's drying up every summer. Okay, so we want something that's going to be able to sustain this life. Intermittent streams, these are streams that have a little influence of groundwater. This is that blue line that is going up and down. This is the groundwater, and that's why perennial streams are always flowing. Our intermittent streams, they sometimes have water, but sometimes they can dry up. Ephemeral streams are what we call our rainy weather streams. So unless there's a lot of snowmelt going on or a lot of rain, these are typically dry otherwise. All right, so we do want a site that has flowing water just to keep our critters alive that we are going to be looking at. You can of course always do chemical monitoring at these sites that are drying up mostly, but for our actual protocols, we do need at least a pool. When we talk about a monitoring site, this is a 300-foot section or 100 yards section of stream. Most desirable, it needs to have a riffle. This creates really diverse habitat for a lot of life within the stream. But of course, we understand that we have different ecoregions here in Missouri, and so you might have a stream up in the plains area that there's just no riffles in that entire region. So if you can get a riffle in there, that's great, but if not, just make sure that there is some water. And sites should not overlap. If you have two sites back to back because you really like the stream, you want to monitor as much as possible on it, make sure they're not overlapping each other. And if you have a hard time envisioning what is 300 feet or 100 yards, it's the length of a football field. All right, and this is an example of what riffle habitat looks like. Riffles are where the water breaks over rocks. Let me back up and say that our protocols are designed for wadable streams. These are streams that you can walk across. So if you're wanting to get out there and monitor on the Missouri River or even on most of the Gasconade River, it's often too deep for what our methods are. So think about wadable streams, something that you're going to be standing in. All right, so in these wadable streams, you're going to have these riffles, and it's where the water breaks over the rocks. You can see it's kind of like white and bubbly, and that's because it's incorporating that atmospheric air into the water. As you can imagine, that means it's very oxygenated water. Very, very happy critters live at the bottom of riffles. You also have usually a lot of rocks, a lot of places for them to hide. You can have vegetation. So this is why we like to have riffles within our stream site to give us the most diversity for the invertebrates that we're going to find. All right, some other important things to think about. What are your goals as a monitor? And we usually follow up this training by asking that to get you kind of thinking about it. Why are you wanting to monitor? Make sure that you're looking to make sure there's habitat. Again, you can monitor chemistry anywhere, but if you're going to be collecting macroinvertebrates, you're going to want to make sure that there is actually habitat to sustain these invertebrates in that stream site. Are there any point or non-point source pollution coming into that stream site? If there is a pipe being discharged at the site, you might want to adopt a site just upstream of it and also one downstream of it. That way you can get a good feel for what this point source pipe is actually affecting the stream. And the same thing goes for tributaries and roads. You don't want a tributary coming in the middle of your monitoring site. Again, you can pick your site just above it or just below it, but never right in the middle of it. And also be conscious that if you are monitoring at a bridge, especially in like St. Louis area where they really like the road salts, chlorides are going to be a lot higher just downstream of this bridge. So you might want to be monitoring upstream of the bridge, or like the other ones, upstream and downstream. So here's a hypothetical monitoring site to help you kind of visualize it. So this area down here could be our monitoring site. So we have RIFFLE habitat, we have root wads, so we have some good habitat for our macroinvertebrates. The riparian zone is the vegetated area along the stream. And we hope that it's 100 feet wide, but we can't always control that. But it's just that area that we visioned in here. Just up from this, we have a tributary that flows in. So if we're measuring or monitoring just below this tributary, we're also getting a feel on what's going on in this trib. Okay, and a tributary is a stream that flows into another stream. If we want to see the actual effect that this tributary is having on the system, we could also monitor upstream of it where there's another riffle and there's also some woody debris or a snag up here as well. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea on what your monitoring site should look like. And a monitoring site cannot be monitored if you don't have access to it. So if you're monitoring on private land, so these are private landowners, whether it is your neighbors or maybe you're just out hiking around and you say, oh, hey, look, there's a stream at the end of this field. Well, who does the field belong to? Are you going to be crossing someone's private property to get to that stream? So if you don't know the landowner, we do have this really nice streamside property owner permission request form on the Stream Team website. This is just a real easy form that you can fill out and leave on the door of a landowner to try to explain to them what you're doing. You know, you can also just knock on the door, talk to them, say you're with Missouri Stream Team program. But we do encourage you to share the data with these landowners because more often than not, they care too about what's going on in their waters. So be open with them on what you're doing. And if they say no, then you move on, you find another site. You also have the opportunity to do water quality monitoring on public land. So this could be your DNR state parks, your Missouri conservation areas. And if you're going to be monitoring on public land, you just want to reach out to either the park manager, the area manager, and make sure they don't have any special projects going on that you might interfere with. And also, they may request your data as well because they also care about the streams. So if you ever need help with either of these two, just reach out and we can kind of get you what you need to make sure that you do have legal access to the waters that you're wanting to monitor. Okay. So here is a site selection scenario. If you have the copy of the notebook with you, there's a little exercise in there on, you know, what would each of these sites tell you about the Grand Watershed. But we're just going to kind of walk through and talk this through together. If you were to be monitoring at site number 1, what would this give you a good picture of? What would monitoring here at site 1 tell you about everything else going on? So this dotted line, this big dashed line, is going to be your watershed. This big stem here is your stream. Then you have all your tributaries. So what would 1 tell you about this watershed? This will give you the overall picture of the entire watershed. Okay. So whenever you just want to know the big picture of it, you can monitor down here at 1. And maybe it's not what you thought it would be. So then you can look at other influences within the watershed. which is why it's going to be good to have a watershed map, which we're going to do later on. You might have a point source in your watershed. So that's this little black box here. So now we can monitor immediately below it and above it to see if maybe this is having a big effect on the watershed as a whole. Okay. And then we have this little tributary up here, and it's another one, measure upstream and downstream. And it will give you an idea on the effect that it has on the stream. Okay. All right. So your stream team monitoring site has to be very clear and understandable for stream team staff in order to put your data in. All right. And you also got to keep your own site straight. So we number our sites chronologically. Our very first site that we do is going to be site number 1. Every single monitor starts off at site number 1. These sites are specific to the monitor. All right. So if Frank and Angie go out monitoring together, Frank has his site number 1, Angie has her site number 1. They're not tied together in any way. All right. Once you are done monitoring, you don't want to go back to site number 1. Maybe you lose access to it. You don't want to be hanging out with Frank anymore, so you're going to go pick a completely different site that he's not at. So you move on to another site. That next site you adopt is now site number 2, and you just won't be reporting anymore for site number 1. All right. Your site location will never change. So, whenever you adopt that site number 2, that's now on the Merrimack River, that's always going to be that site number for you. And we have some monitors out there that have 100 sites assigned to them. Most of our monitors, though, they might have 1, maybe 2 assigned to them. But if you forget which site you are, reach out to stream team staff and we can give you a list of what your sites are and their numbers as well. All right, so how do you tell us where your sites are? On each of the data sheets, there is a little line at the very top in the header that says location description. And this is a verbal description. If you were talking to someone that had a map in front of them, how would you explain to them where it's at? Okay, GPS coordinates are not a good substitute. Yes, you can record them, but not everyone's devices are going to be super accurate. So we rely more on that verbal description to accurately tell us where something's at. And a good verbal description can be referencing north, south, east, or west, roads, cities, bridges, intersections, stuff that you can actually find on the map. With that said, you don't want to be referencing trees or stores, temporary things, okay? And a good example would be saying that your monitoring site is 300 feet downstream of Highway AA. Okay, if Laura has a map in front of her and she knows that she is looking for XYZ stream, she can find where Highway AA is and then go 300 feet downstream from that highway, and she'll be able to find your site. In order to establish your first site and any site after that, we need to have a site map. Okay, so you can use Google Maps, you can use Apple Maps, you can use the Stream Team Interactive map, you can use a map on DNR's website, but you will find where your site is on that map. You can mark it, you can print it off, use a pen, whatever you need to do, but make sure it also has your name, it has the stream name, the county you're monitoring in, and that site description, just so we can be very confident that is your site when we put it into the database. If we don't have a site map, we cannot enter that data. But now that map is only required that first time. Once it's established, you don't have to submit that map again. Here's an example of what your new site map could be like. Earlier, we talked about our site on the Ruby Doo Creek with that little red dot in the watersheds. This is that same site. So this is on Ruby Doo Creek. This is in Pulaski County. If we were to submit this new site map so that way we can start reporting data on it, this is what it's going to look like. We have a star where our monitoring site is at. And our description would be Chris Riggert, He's on stream team 2383. Site number 1, this is his very first site. This is in Pulaski County on Ruby-Doo Creek, 1/4 mile downstream from Highway 17. So here's Highway 17, 1/4 mile downstream, and it's parallel to Pippin Road. Okay, if Laura got this on her desk and she had a separate map, she would be able to pinpoint exactly where it's at, and that is what we need. Here are just a few resources to find some maps. Stream Team Interactive Map, if there happens to be another an existing site there, they have a site IDX, you can also report that as well on your data sheet, so that way we can make sure that we assign the correct site to you. All right, so we have this nice little form that our volunteers can fill out the very first time they go out monitoring. And while we don't do anything with the data that is submitted on this form, it allows our monitor to step back and look at the entire stream site to give a really good idea on what's going on, what parts of it to actually look at. So we're going to just kind of go over this form. On all of our data sheets, they have this identical header. Okay, it's the same information on all data sheets. If you ever send us a batch of data, make sure the header information is filled out on every single data sheet. Just assume they're all going to be ripped apart and entered separately. So if you batch them together, make sure they're completely filled out each time. You have a site number up here. Since this is going to be your first site, you'll probably have it as site number 1. Your stream name. The county is the stream county, not where you live at, but where you're actually at. And then the site location is that verbal description that I was just talking about. Your date, we do need a month, day, and complete year. All right. Your time should be reported in military, please. Rainfall should be reported as inches in the last 7 days. We will provide our monitors with a rain gauge. So if you happen to live nearby your stream, you can just reference your rain gauge. Otherwise, you can look online. There's a couple different websites that you can use. We'll cover those on Thursday on where to find rainfall data. Your water temperature will be in degrees Celsius. We also provide a thermometer with your equipment at the field. The trained data submitter is you. Okay, this is always going to be you, and this person is going to be tied to the site number up here. Your stream team number, if you forget it, you can ask us, we'll tell you what it is. And participants is any person that comes out and helps you at the stream site. This could be your friends, your kids, your class, someone that you just saw at the stream and they wanted to help you collect macroinvertebrate data. But this is where their name goes as well. So make sure that you do fill all that out because we cannot input data if we don't have this information. All right, here's a couple of the sites where you can find the rainfall information. Weather Underground, you can find historical data on there. Weather.com, NOAA, sometimes you can find it on news stations, or you can use that rain gauge. This is probably the most challenging part for people to find their preferred rainfall source. So if you ever have problems, as always, reach out to us and we can help you find that information that you need. All right, so here's another activity for us. So this site selection data sheet header, all this information has been submitted to us. Believe it or not, this is all real stuff. Not all in the same data sheet, but this is real, what people actually submit. So we're gonna kind of go through this and talk about what on here was not correct and why it's not correct. So go ahead and I'm going to go through this step by step. Just drop it in the chat on what you think is wrong with it. So the site number is 4079. Why do you think that would be incorrect? Just go ahead and drop it into the chat. All right. Well, I will let you know. Oh, yep, Brandon, this is supposed to be their first site. So I don't think that they have 4,079 sites adopted. I would guess this is probably their stream team number. We're over 6,000 stream teams now, so that's more likely a stream team number. So that should probably say 1, but definitely not 4,000. The stream is Litter Getters. This is probably their stream team name, not the stream name. What about North County? Go ahead and drop in the chat, what county is North County? There is just a small region in Missouri that actually understands what this is. Does anyone know what North County refers to? St. Louis, thank you, Tom. All right, North County is North County, St. Louis. If you are down in Joplin area, you probably have no idea what North County is because North County does not exist. It's not a real county. So don't use your local names, use true names. So if you were sampling in North County, St. Louis, report this as St. Louis County. All right, our site location is behind the Smith Place by the big oak tree. The big problem with this site location is Laura has no idea where the Smith Place is at. And that big oak tree, well, it just takes one big storm and that oak tree is no longer there. Okay, we can't find this location on the map. Yes, there were coordinates provided, but it's not a good substitute for a quality verbal description, okay? If you're gonna provide the coordinates, that should just be supplemental. So we need a good verbal description that can be found on a map. What about the date? Can you guys drop that one in the chat? Why is 4/11 not a good date for us? There's no year, but what if 11 was referring to the year? What if this was collected in April of 2011? We can't guess this, okay? So we do need a month, day, and year, which brings me to another point. If you guys go out and you collect data and you completely forget about getting it submitted because life happens, you find it 2 years later in the junk drawer in your kitchen, we will still gladly take that data sheet as long as it has the date on it. All right, so make sure it's in month, day, year format. Military time. This says it's at 6:30, but this isn't in military time. So is this 6:30 a.m. or 6:30 p.m.? Okay, so it's pretty important to actually put in there the military time. Rainfall trace. We see this a lot. I'm guilty of it myself, that it just kind of sprinkled a little bit, but didn't really rain. Well, go ahead and report that as either a 0 or maybe a 0.1. All right. But we do actually need a number value for it to be entered. Water temperature of 73 degrees Celsius. Can you guys drop in the chat why this might not be right? Yes, this is very hot. If it is 73, anything in that water is cooking. So this is probably being reported in Fahrenheit. We do want that in degrees Celsius. The trained data submitter is reported as Ms. Brown. You guys can probably guess how many Ms. Browns that we have in our database. It's probably more than one. I have not counted, but it is more than one. So this was probably submitted by a class, and that's because the participants are 15 third grade class. Was awesome. So I would suspect that Ms. Brown probably did this. Yes, it could also be Mrs. Brown's daughter. You are right. Ms. Brown probably did this activity with the class, and they also completed this data sheet, which is another problem. We want the trained data submitter to be filling out the data sheet. If you do this activity with kids or with a class, that's totally fine, and they can fill out their own data sheets. But if you want to submit it to DNR to be put into the database, it needs to be completed by that trained data submitter, and that's just for quality assurance, quality control, to make sure that this is quality data. All right. Last thing on here is the stream team number. Whole lot of question marks. They don't know what it is. That's okay. It's not absolutely necessary, but it does help on our end to make sure that we are putting this under the correct stream team if a monitor happens to be on multiple stream teams. If there's any questions on that, please ask it in the chat. We did have another question come through, and I want to kind of circle back to it real quick. And that was if there was a monitoring site that was abandoned, it's not being monitored anymore, and you want to pick it up, how do you adopt it? To adopt an abandoned site, all you do is just start submitting data for that site. We don't have any official log in the system on who's monitoring it. We just have the data that's being submitted. So if you find it on the Stream Team interactive map, and you'll be able to see that there is a site IDX number, or site number associated with it. Put that on your map or your email into Laura, and she'll know exactly where it's at. And then they just kind of add that site to you, and then you can start collecting data for it. Here is an image of the entire site selection form. Again, this is not data that you're going to have to submit all the time. It just helps you get started with that very first site. So up here, we have that header information completed. Again, we are using our Rubidoux Creek site location. Some of the things that are covered on here are going to be your weather conditions. We mostly care about cloud cover. You know, if it's raining, go ahead and put in it's raining. If it's doing something other, like maybe it's icing outside, it's sleeting, you can put that under other. Water appearance, you can't just look into a stream and determine, ooh, it's really brown, okay? What we recommend is taking some kind of a clear container, whether it's a clear water bottle or an old cleaned out peanut butter jar, whatever it is, but scoop up the water and look at it in the container. Because sometimes the reflection of the sediment might be kind of putting some color into the water or whatnot, but actually look at it in a clear container. Water odor, again, sometimes you might walk out to a stream site and it smells really funky, but it's because there might be a rotting deer off in the woods. So whatever container that you just scooped up water, smell it from that container. See what the actual water smells with, not the environment around you. If you can't really describe it, just do your best under other if it doesn't quite fall into everything else. But we're hoping the stream is clear and we're hoping that it doesn't have an odor to it. And what is the land use in the watershed? And this is the big picture. So as you're driving into your stream site, what are you passing? You know, are there farms? Are there parks? Are there golf courses? Soccer fields, just trees. What is going on the stream bank? Okay, this is that riparian area that we hope is going to be well vegetated, but maybe it's not. And when we talk about trees, shrubs, and grasses, we don't have a set size or height for what qualifies as a shrub versus a grass, so just use your judgment on it. Habitat refers to within the stream. So if you're looking in the water, is there a pool with no moving water? Is there that riffle? A run is where water is just flowing. Backwater is going to be that kind of flooded area that's up on the stream bank or wrapped around, and it's not quite in the main channel. Your root wads, your logs, your felled trees that are in the water, aquatic vegetation, large boulders, all of this stuff is habitat, okay? Invertebrates can live in it, so we want to know what you have out there. Sometimes you might have artificial objects. A pedestrian bridge may have been collapsed and fell into the stream, and now it's part of the stream. Well, that could be your artificial object, and you are welcome to describe it in the other field. And we look at algae. This can be close growing algae, which is just kind of fuzzy on the rocks, and it can also be filamentous, where it's several inches long and just kind of flowing in the water. Your stream bed. This is the very bottom of the stream that's underneath where the water's flowing, okay? There are some references on the back side of this data sheet that kind of tells you general sizes for what they are. Silt or mud, that's going to be typically either just fairly smooth whenever you rub it between your fingers. Your sand is going to be the grittiness. Then you have your gravel. Your cobble is going to be about 2 inches to 10 inches. Your boulder is going to be anything greater than 10 inches. And then bedrock is going to be that flat, giant rock that just doesn't end at the stream bottom. And what matters in these categories is that it equals 100%. So that way you know everything is accounted for. In aquatic organisms, we would like to know this on all data sheets. Did you see anything swimming in the water? Are there any fish? Okay. Also, you can pick up a couple rocks and see if you see any invertebrates in there as well.
Hey, April, we've got a couple of questions that came in regards to collecting data. First
Okay.
one is there a preferable time of day or year or post-rain event that they should try to monitor?
That is a really good question. So whenever we are collecting data, and this is also in the notebook, I believe it's on the very last page, the very last cover, you will do your biological monitoring of the invertebrates 2 times a year. And we always recommend in late spring, so once it kind of starts warming up, but before the leaves come on. And then in the fall, you want to monitor as close to the end of fall as you can before the leaves fall off. But we don't want to monitor any more than that just for the macroinvertebrates. And whenever you do stream discharge, you should be collecting that with every monitoring trip. So if you're going out collecting chemistry data or visual survey data or macroinvertebrate data, you want to collect your stream discharge data as well. And that's kind of supplement to give more meaning to that data that you collect. And post-rainfall, that's a really good question. And I think that one, if you have a goal in mind that would involve either sedimentation or what's coming in with your runoff, but that would probably be better for monitoring with chemical parameters, because if you have a large rainfall event, it's going to be washing out a lot of your invertebrates. And so you want to give the water a chance to settle back down and for invertebrates to rehabilitate those little nooks and crevices so you can actually start finding them again. Was there another question?
Yeah, the other question was in regards to using a rain gauge reading. Does that rain gauge need to be within a certain distance of your site?
That is actually a great question. Probably the first time I have heard that question asked. Laura or Robert or Randy, do you guys have any preference? Because I don't think we actually have that set in the protocol.
It just needs to be in the same watershed.
All right.
So you could try to map your watershed and try to get it within that area range. That's the goal when you're looking at rain.
All right. Thank you, Laura. So for the rain gauge, have it close within the same watershed. And on Thursday, we'll actually go through the steps on mapping the watershed. So if your house happens to be in the same watershed as your stream location, you'll be able to identify that. Were there any other questions?
One more that popped up was regarding the substrate. Is the stream bed, sand, gravel, etc. for the site or for the entire 300 feet?
It is for your 300-foot monitoring site. That is also an excellent question. So when you're looking at your stream bed, when you're looking at the riparian area, this is all within your 300-foot monitoring site. And was that the last question that wasn't addressed?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you,
These are
Lynn.
the ones that I can see.
Okay, I appreciate it. And if there's more that pop up, we can also answer those whenever we get a chance later on. All right, so let's talk about the location, the importance of your location ID. This is important because if we don't know where your site's at, we don't know where to put that data. Okay, so your data really doesn't have much meaning if we don't have the site. And for all new sites, we do need to have what that new site number is going to be, your site location, and that map. Okay, and we need to have that site clearly indicated on that map as well. What happens if you have an unnamed stream, which can happen? If you're looking at a map and you think, well, we always call this stream Gopher Creek. Well, it's either going to be a local name, so it's not an official name, or maybe Gopher Creek just didn't fit on the map for that little tiny tributary. And also a lot of intermittent streams won't have a name on the map as well. And for intermittent streams, you can know what those are because it's going to be a dashed line on your map. You can, if you really like the name Gopher Creek and it means a lot to that area, but it isn't the official name, you can always go to the Geographic Names Information System and apply to have that stream named. Okay, we have some of our volunteers that they have gone out and made lots of efforts to get a lot of streams named that didn't have names, and that's awesome. If you are ever monitoring and you want to select a site but there is no name, just refer to it as a tributary to the next big stream that is named. And sometimes you can have something that is a tributary to Merrimack Creek. All right, so you could have tributaries to tributaries. All right, and how do we get your site added? Once we have your site added into the database, you guys can submit your data online. So it's super easy to do, but we just have to get that added by having your map and your information on where that location is at, that verbal description. And if you want to submit your site selection form, you can. Otherwise, you're welcome to hold on to it and just kind of keep it as a reference. This will be kind of a precursor for whenever we do visual survey in level 1 monitoring. All right, we have now a site selection poll. Again, this is just a few short questions to kind of gauge on understanding on this. Maybe there's something we need to cover a little bit more. All right, welcome back. We are going to review over the poll questions that we asked, and it looks like we're doing a pretty good job here. The first question is, how long is a monitoring site? The correct answer is 300 feet or 100 yards. Which are important considerations for site selection? Should select all of those. They are all very important. We'll make sure we have habitat in there. There's no tributaries entering in the middle of the site. There's no discharge pipes in the middle of the site. You do have accessibility to the stream, and that it does maintain at least a pool all year round, if not just flowing water. Are GPS coordinates okay for good verbal site description? No. They are a good supplement, but we do still need that verbal site description. And what 3 things must match for adding new monitoring sites? We do need to have the site number, the site location description, and the map. The water temperature, we don't need that for mapping it, although it is still helpful, but make sure those other 3 things do match. All right. Let's talk about stream discharge. This is the only thing we're going to talk about today that is real, true data that you'll be submitting. This is an actual data sheet. So this is what you're here for, right? We will cover what is stream discharge, the factors that influence stream discharge or stream flow, why is it important to water quality, and how do we measure it? Okay, so what is stream discharge? If you guys want to, I know that I have someone in here that knows exactly what stream discharge is, so go ahead and drop that in the chat. What do you think is stream discharge? Flow rate. For the most part, yes. Stream discharge is the amount of water flowing past a certain point in a given amount of time. Exactly. Thank you, John. John nailed it. So this is actually going to be the product of cross-sectional area, surface velocity, and that gives us stream discharge, and we report this in CFS or cubic feet per second. You may or may not have seen a storm hydrograph before, so I will explain this to you because this has a big part in understanding stream discharge. This is a general hydrograph, and a hydrograph is a graph of rainfall and how it is affecting the flow. So this top graph is the rainfall intensity, how much rainfall is actually hitting the ground. And this hydrograph is going to be your stream flow and how this rainfall is affecting the stream flow. You can see that there is a small lag between the peak rainfall and the peak of the storm or the stream flow. And as it rises, that's called the rising limb, and then it finally peaks. And once the rain falls off, and then it's going to start recessing, the recession limb. So the stream's going to start falling back down to its base flow. And sometimes this could be hours, sometimes it can be in days, weeks. You know, we've all have been part of the big flood seasons where it seems like we're flooded for months at a time. But you also have in your urban streams that are pretty flashy, where it can peak and fall back down to base flow in just a couple hours. Here is a hydrograph pulled from USGS. This is a fantastic website. You can go to Google and just search for USGS water data Missouri. You can find an interactive map for Missouri, and you can get hydrographs for lots of different streams across the state. So this hydrograph is of the Missouri River. Just a couple years ago, this was back in 2015, that's a little bit longer ago than I had thought that it was. But this was the big New Year flood. It's kind of a strange time of year for us to have this huge flood. But right here, you can see that we were pretty good levels for the river up until about November. And then they started going up. And then we had a ton of precipitation, and the hydrograph kept going up. And we were up over 100,000 CFS. This was a very big flood. This kind of brownish line down here is the mean or the average. So you can tell we were way above average for months. And this, I mean, we went all the way through September being way higher than average. So that right there is just one hydrograph. As you can see, it kind of goes up and down, and that's normal, okay? All right, so what are some factors that affect that stream discharge? Of course, precipitation. And this isn't just rain, and we're probably going to see this very soon with all the snow melt that's going to be happening. Even snow melt can help flood our streams. The stream bank slope, your greater slope means a greater stream velocity. It really does affect that stream discharge. Your vegetation. Vegetation actually slows down that stream that's coming across, or the water that's coming across the landscape. If you have vegetation in the stream, that's going to be slowing down your stream flow. Your soil type and geology. Again, if you have something that's really smooth, it's going to be flowing a lot faster. But if you have a lot of larger rocks, rather than just the silt and mud, those large rocks are going to be taking up a lot of that energy. The gradient, again, greater flow. And your groundwater and tributaries. And this is just the other influences that are coming into your stream. You know, are there other water sources? Some of the anthropogenic or man-made effects are going to be your land use. Have we completely cleared off the landscape so we don't have the vegetation slowing the runoff? Have we channelized the streams? And this is just cutting a straight line down our pretty sinuous streams. Whenever you channelize a stream, there's nothing to slow down that stream flow until it hits the end of the channelization. And then you're going to have a lot of undercutting, a lot of erosion, even some flooding. And then dams. Dams kind of do both ends of it, okay? You can dam up the water, nothing's flowing through. But dams can also be designed to release water. So what happens whenever a dam releases the water? Well, there's a huge flow then that comes out of that dam. So you can have both ends of the spectrum there. So these are just some good visuals on how these natural factors can affect the hydrograph, okay? The blue line is going to be in an urban area. The dashed line is going to be more of a natural setting, okay? So these are just the differences on how they're going to be changing. Okay. And here is the blue line showing your urban storm flow. These are your flashy streams. I saw a couple of you were up in Columbia area, so you're probably very familiar with what this looks like. When you have a big rainstorm in the middle of March, your streams are going to go up, 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 and then they're just going to go right back down to normal. Okay, and that's how they work in an area that doesn't have a lot of the vegetation. They have a lot of impervious surfaces. They're what we call flashy. All right, so let's look at some average stream discharges across Missouri. All right, we have Elk Fork Assault and Little Piney River. These two are both relatively same size, but the Elk Fork has a much greater range, whereas Little Piney, not so much. It's a little bit smaller range, doesn't quite look as buffered, or it does look a little more buffered than the Elk Fork. The big difference in these are going to be where they're located at. The Elk Fork is up north and more of a prairie region, whereas Little Piney is down with karst topography. So we have a lot more groundwater influence for the Little Piney. And so that kind of buffers the stream flow. So it's not quite as flashy as that prairie stream. I also want to point out the Mississippi River and how high that can get. You guys see this number down here? It's over 1 million CFS. So there's a lot of water flowing through the Mississippi River. And if you envision CFS, that's a cubic feet per second. So that's one small box of water flowing past a certain point every second. And the Mississippi River has 1 million of those flowing through every second. Okay, that's a lot of water and a lot of power. All right. So why is stream discharge important? If you recall what I said during that last presentation at the end, that we want stream discharge data every time you submit a data sheet, okay? It helps us give just a little bit more insight into what's going on in the stream. So this helps us look at the physical features, why the stream looks the way that it does, the chemistry, why the parameters are either high or they're low. And then also with biology, you know, if we're not finding any life in the stream, but there is a huge flood that just ripped through there, well, that's a good indicator on why. It's not that it's bad stream or poor habitat. There's just a lot of water that just washed them all out. Okay. So this is just a good little visualization on how stream discharge creates our stream system. It can, whenever you have your stream flow, of course, you have your riffles because water's flowing over those rocks. When water comes through, it will kind of eat at this bank over here and deposit where it says point bar or the gravel bar. And so that creates usually a deeper side here on that outside bend. And then your stream slows down at this point, and then it'll start flowing again, flowing until it hits another bend. It'll kind of eat out on this bank and deposit here on this inside bank, okay? And so now you have an idea whenever you're looking at streams, why they develop the way that they do. Okay, this is a very murky looking stream, right? It kind of looks like chocolate milk. More than likely what happened in this system is that we had some sedimentation. It probably came in off of some rainfall, and that runoff came into the stream. And now we have just a lot of sedimentation, murkiness, and a lot of chemicals, a lot of nutrients can be tied up in the sedimentation that is now suspended within the water column. And something like this, it can also kind of suffocate out anything requiring oxygen through the gills. Okay, it can affect your dissolved oxygen. When you have a lot of sedimentation in the column, you're going to have less opportunity for oxygen to be in there. The sedimentation also increases temperature because it kind of takes in that energy from the sunlight. And we'll harp on this later on, but a rise in temperature means a lowering in dissolved oxygen. Okay, so stream discharge, it affects a lot, and it gives more of an insight into the other data that you're submitting to us. Stream discharge, of course, affects your plant and animal communities. Not only can you get everything washed out when it flows through there, but these guys, they do require some kind of a flow. Most of them. We do have a lot of taxa that are just happy in a very slow pool or even backwaters, kind of swampy areas. But we have some that have gills that they need that running water. So if you have a stream section that the water is just not flowing, it might be the middle of summer, water's low, not much inputs coming in. Well, those guys that require gills, they're not going to be very happy. So they're either going to be perishing or they're going to be emerging if they're close to it and try to get out of that water, and they're going to be flying away as adults. All right, so again, why is this stuff important? This has a huge influence on what we are seeing as the chemical data and also on the aquatic life. It helps give more meat to that data you submit. Okay, so that's enough on the background on stream discharge and why it's important. So now we're going to talk about how to collect stream discharge data. And I will warn you, this seems a little bit hairy and intimidating, but it's really not that bad. If you happen to have your notebook with you, there is an example of the stream discharge data sheet in there if you just want to kind of glance at it. But the data sheet will walk you through step by step, and it will tell you exactly what needs to be added together. And even better, when you submit this data online, it does all the math for you, so you don't even have to worry about it. Okay. Here are the materials needed to measure stream flow. We will provide you with a float or a wiffle golf ball, a 100-foot measuring tape, and these are measured out in tenths of a foot. And then the stuff that you will have to provide on your own will be 2 sticks or metal stakes, not totally critical to it, but you will need to make yourself a depth rod. And this should have marks on it in tenths of a foot. That's how we measure all of our units are reported in feet, so they're measured in tenths of a foot. It helps to have a stopwatch, which you can just use your phone, watch in your hand. And then a 10-foot rope, also not super necessary, but it makes it a whole lot easier. So what is a good location to measure stream discharge? It is best to find a spot that is relatively straight, which we know it doesn't happen all the time in a stream, but relatively. It's free of obstacles, and that would be felled trees, some debris in the water, a large boulder, and that's because it is just creating an obstacle. It's going to be affecting that stream flow in that little stretch. We don't need much of a stretch, maybe just a 10-foot section. So hopefully you can find a good location within your stream. And we want to have noticeable current. If the water isn't flowing, then we really can't measure the stream flow. And it helps to have some kind of a uniform depth. On these data sheets, there is a small section up towards the top right underneath the header where you can indicate if the flow was too high, meaning it wasn't safe for you to get out there and measure. Your safety's first. We don't want you measuring it if it's not safe. And you can also indicate if the water was too low or the flow was too low to measure. And that means 1, it's just barely trickling over the gravel, or 2, the water just isn't flowing. If you were to drop one of those float balls on the water, it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. And that's okay to indicate that. That's very important information for us to know, okay? So here's what this data sheet looks like. Again, we have that header information at the top that we covered with site selection. And make sure that you are, again, filling out all header information on all data sheets you are submitting to us. Okay. Here is that little section where you can indicate that flow is too low to measure or flow is too high to measure. Okay. There are going to be some real lucky people out there that are monitoring close to a USGS gauging station, and we'll go over those details towards the end of this chapter. But there you can just report what the gauge number is and what their reading was at the time that you were out monitoring. So measuring stream discharge, these are all the steps in it. And again, I know this can seem a little bit much, but it's actually pretty easy. So your first step is going to be measuring the stream width. How wide is that section of stream? So we will provide you with the measuring tape that you will stretch all the way across your stream. You will want to be measuring from flowing edge to flowing edge. If you look closely at your stream, usually the first few inches along the side of it is not flowing. It's just kind of dead water. We do not want to measure there. So go in just a few inches where the water is actually moving, and that's where we're going to measure the stream width. Again, these tape measures we give you are in tenths of a foot, not in inches. If you look on here carefully, you'll know that's right because it stops at 9 before it goes to 2 feet. Okay, we don't see a 10 inches, we don't see 11 inches. This is all in tenths of a foot. I hope that's clear to you guys. If you ever use a different measuring tape that's in inches, please, use the one that we provide or flip it over. Sometimes it also has feet on the other side of it. The depth rod, on Thursday, we are going to talk about biological monitoring, and you will have to use some rods in the side of your net. We would recommend using one of those rods to make a depth stick. And this depth stick is what you are going to use to measure the depth of the water. Usually just a dowel rod is all that you need. All right, so back to stream width. You can move any large rocks that are in that 10-foot area that you're trying to measure. Just keep them in the stream, but just move them out of the way. Here is someone actually demonstrating how you measure straight across. All right, this is what it's going to look like. And then we are going into measuring the cross-sectional area, which is taking depth measurements. All right, in this illustration, we see that we have a width and then also the depth. And we don't just take one depth because the stream bottom is not uniform. It's not straight all the way across. So we take depth measurements at increments all the way across the stream, and then we find an average. For our example, the stream width is 12 feet wide, and that 12 feet is from flowing edge to flowing edge. For a stream width that is less than 20 feet wide, we do those depth measurements at every 1 foot. Once it's more than 20 feet wide, we measure it every 2 feet. And the reason for this is just because of how many fields that we have available to us to input data into the database. Okay. They only have a limited number of fields. All right, so here Kat is demonstrating how we do the depth measurements. You can see that she is standing downstream to read that rod. And you can tell that as the water's hitting that depth rod, and also as it's hitting her legs, it is kind of creeping up one side, and then it's creating an eddy on the front side. All right, and that's why we want to stand downstream. One more thing to note on here. When you have a little bit higher flow, it's going to creep up quite a bit on the backside of the depth rod, and there could be a difference of maybe a couple inches from where it's creeping up and where the actual stream is on the front side of it. In those cases, just try to take a good average. The big thing here is being consistent. All right, so here are some values for doing that cross-sectional area. As you can tell, it can vary quite a bit from 0.2 all the way to 1.2, so big differences, and that's why we find an average. The sum of depths came out to 7.7 feet, and our average is 0.64 feet. So that was our average depth. And then we put that into our formula to find the cross-sectional area. You guys are like me, not a big fan of math, you're probably glazing over, but it's okay. Like I said, this stuff is actually pretty easy. This is what it looks like on the data sheet. Whenever you put the stuff in online, it does all the math for you. So you just have to make sure that you have your field measurements are in there and correct. All right, so here's where your depth measurements go. You put them into sum of depths. Then the number of depth that you measured, which was 12, you had 12 measurements. Gives you your average depth. That number comes down here. And then we multiply that by the stream width. and that gives us a cross-sectional area of 7.7. I hope you guys are still following this. We will practice this out in the field when we do the field work, and it might become a little more clear than when you're actually hands-on with it. Okay, the next step, a little bit easier, and that's measuring the stream velocity. Stream velocity is also the speed that the water is flowing. All right, here these ladies are demonstrating how we do our surface velocity. This is where the 10-foot rope comes in handy. So the float distance doesn't have to be 10 feet. It is the default number. You can lengthen it if water is going pretty fast. You can shorten it if water is going pretty slow, but it's just a number that gets factored in whenever we're trying to figure out what the velocity is. So here we're going to use the default of 10 feet. We start at the beginning of the 10-foot section and we stop the float at the end of that 10-foot section. And we want the stream width right there, straight in the middle of it. And our friend here in the pink, she's going to put the float ball, she's going to drop it upstream, give it time to reach its max velocity by the time it hits the start point. When it hits start point, we're going to start recording the time. And we're going to see how long it takes to float until the stop point. This helps to have more than one person doing this, just because you can kind of lose your float ball. In this case, it looks like they may have actually used an orange. I've heard people using cherry tomatoes, but we just want something that is mutually buoyant. I mean, it's going to be a little bit above water and a little bit below water. And that way it's not going to be heavily influenced by the air above or the stream bottom. Okay. We require at least 4 velocity float trials. So that's 4 times of throwing the ball out into the water and seeing how fast it can float 10 feet. As you move from the outside to the inside of the stream, you're going to notice that the velocity picks up a little bit. There's less resistance from the stream bottom and the stream edge, and that's totally normal. And again, that's why we find an average. The more velocity float trials you can do, the more accurate it's going to be. Okay. So for our example, we did the 10 feet float distance. These are our float trials. We did 5 float trials, and they range from 22 seconds down to 13 seconds. And the sum of those was 89. We divide that by our number of float trials, which was 5, to give us an average float time of 17.8. And then we take our distance floated, which was 10 feet, divide that by our float time, and that gives us an average surface velocity of 0.56 feet per second. Another factor that goes into this is how rough is the stream bottom? Is it really smooth, where it's not going to be creating very much friction, or is it pretty rough where it might be pulling back on that water? Most of our streams are going to be at a 0.8, meaning that it's rough, loose rocks, coarse gravel. So we use that correctional value of 0.8. Some streams may have a smooth, mud, sandy, bedrock, paved stream bottom. So we consider those all smooth, and that would have a correction value of 0.9. So this is just factoring in that friction from the stream bottom. So with that, that brings us down to a 0.45 feet per second velocity. And our final calculation is putting all the pieces together to see what our stream flow is. In this case, we multiply the cross-sectional area, corrected stream velocity, and it gives us 3.47 cubic feet per second. So this is actually pretty low. This is a nice, happy, wadeable stream, very easy to walk across. So that's about 3, cubic feet boxes of water flowing past a given point for every second. And some reminders, of all the data sheets we receive, this one probably has the most errors on it. So make sure that you are doing the right amount of depth measurements across your stream section. So if it's a 12-foot section, we need to have 12 depth measurements. That's 1 depth measurement every foot, unless the stream width is over 20 feet, and then we do it every 2 feet. Also, do not report zeros on this. If you are reporting a 0 for stream depth, that tells us there's no water right there. So you're probably sitting on top of a rock or a stick or whatever, or maybe even a gravel bar. So either go just around that rock, or if there's a gravel bar in the middle, you shouldn't be using that section. So move yourself. On the back side of that, the reminders would be at least 4 float trials are required. You do more if you want to be more accurate. And you also don't have to use the float distance of 10. It's just a default number that we use. Okay, let's talk about those USGS gauging stations that some of you will be so lucky to get to use, so you don't have to go out there throwing float balls in the water. Here's a screenshot of what that interactive map looks like on the USGS website. Again, I usually find it just by going to Google and typing in USGS water data Missouri. You can also type in USGS water data Merrimack River. Okay, however, we'll get you there. But down here on this map, you can click on a site and it'll take you there and it will give you whatever data they have available. The data can vary between each site. If you have a mobile device, a cell phone, there's a mobile web app. So it's not an actual app you download, but it's their website on your mobile device, but it will use your GPS and you can actually get more data through your mobile device because it will also pull in rain gauge data from local areas that are providing that to USGS. So if you're ever out there, give that a quick look to see what data is available around you. Okay, so there are over 200 gauging stations in Missouri. You can use a USGS gauging station if the station is within a ½ mile of your site. Okay, if it's greater than that, then it's too far away. You won't be able to use it. And there cannot be any inputs or outputs between that gauging station and your site. So if there's another stream that comes in or a discharge pipe, storm flow, you cannot use that gauging station. All right. Oop, trying to give you guys the answer on this. Okay, for a stream width of 29.6 feet, stream depth should be measured how many feet? Go ahead and drop this into the chat. So a stream width. How many depth measurements are we going to take? I'm seeing the number 2 a lot, and that would be right. We are going to be taking depth measurements every 2 feet. Good job, you guys. How many depth measurements should be recorded? Oh, gave you guys that answer. So if you were looking, if we're doing every 2 feet, it will be 15. That's correct. And how many velocity float trials should be recorded? I see a minimum of 4, which would be absolutely correct. All right, you guys are on this. Yes, at least 4. You can do more, at least 4. All right, let's go ahead and review over the polling. First question asks, which choice defines stream discharge? The correct answer is volume of water flowing past a particular stream location in time. So this is a factor of the volume and the velocity and that cross-sectional area. Which factors affect discharge? Answer that would be all of them. It would be precipitation, land use, soil type, and stream gradient. Is stream discharge important to stream biology? And I would say you all rocked that answer because everyone said yes, that is correct. Calculating cross-sectional area of a stream is the first step in measuring stream discharge, and that is true. That is the first thing we do. How close must your site be to a USGS gauging station to use it for your stream discharge? It needs to be within ½ of a mile, so 0.5 miles would be the right answer. We'll start on Thursday, same time. You will have to register for that. You'll also have opportunities to take the same live workshop in March and also in April. And this will be, the recording of this one will be available on the Stream Team website after Thursday after we have that class done. So with that said, what questions do you guys have? And we will do our best to answer them. Now, there was a question earlier on about what time of day is best for monitoring. And sorry for our night owls, first thing in the morning is usually the best, especially whenever we're thinking about our warmer seasons. When it gets pretty warm during the day, the stream can be warmer. First thing in the morning is when dissolved oxygen is going to be the lowest. So it gives us a really good idea on what our stream is capable of supporting. And that's also going to be when our invertebrates are nice and cool and not just heat stress from the middle of the day. John had asked a really good question on stream width about, if you have a stream width of say 10 feet, shouldn't you be measuring 11 depths total? All that we care is that, yes, you are doing at least 10 of those. The more that you do, the more accurate it is, but don't report more than what the boxes are available because we can't enter that data into the database. All right, I'll give you guys, we still have 4 more minutes. I'm not going to leave you until noon. But if you have any more questions that you can think of, please feel free to go ahead and drop those into the chat. Otherwise, you can reach out to us on our emails. You can find all of our contact information at mostreamteam.org. You can respond back to the email announcement we sent out earlier, and we can definitely get you guys going. Christopher asked, is fall and spring the only time data needs to be reported? Fall and spring are the times to be collecting the biological data. We don't want you to collect this more because we don't want to disrupt the habitats too much. But whenever we get to level 1, we're going to do the chemical monitoring and visual survey, and those can be collected 4 times a year or even more for our projects, the special projects that some of our volunteers are doing. Gail mentioned about how she saw so many dragonfly and damselfly larvae in February. Yes, we will take reports any time of the year. If you want to go out when it's still icy outside, yes, we do have monitors that actually break through the ice to collect their water quality data. Our volunteers are very, very determined to get their data, and we really do appreciate that. So you can submit it anytime. Just the best times of the year is going to be that late spring and fall. How do you find active stream teams in your area? If you have not already started a stream team, you're not already an active stream team volunteer, whenever you sign up, you can request a list of active stream teams in your area, and that list will be provided to you. You can also reach out to the coordination biologist, and they can get you in touch with specific teams or projects that are going on depending on what your interests are. Another question is, do you need stream discharge to submit any other data points? And I'm thinking that by data points, you mean the other data sheets. No, you don't have to. Again, if conditions aren't safe, if you don't have time for it, we understand, we're real people too. We can still take the other data. So if you submit your biological data, but you don't have stream discharge to go with it, it's okay, we still accept it. Another question about how often to be collecting this data. Again, we have our recommended months, and you just need to go out there just once during that season. And that would be the bare minimum that we'd be happy with. Now, if you want to get out there and start collecting more data, go for it. This is we just give you the how-to, and we give you the equipment to do it, but you can really make this yours depending on what your goals are. Oh, great question from Brandon. He wants to know if this data is available for shared use. So you can access data on the interactive map for each site. So you click on the site, you can access the data that's available. If you are interested in the site for an entire stream or a watershed, an area, whatever it is, you can reach out to staff directly and we can export that data to you in an Excel data sheet. We hope at some point that we can have you pull that data as you need it yourself, but right now our database just doesn't have that capability, but we can export that to you. Just ask for it and we can get it to you. Also, Brandon, on that data sheet, once you open up the map, you click on the icon and then it'll pull up a table. You click more info or more data, and that's how you get to the data. And we'll cover some of that on Thursday. We'll actually drive you through it. And Karen wants to know if the amount of invertebrates in a creek indicate the health of it. Yes, that's part of it. We're really looking for a good diversity in the streams, but also that does have a part with habitat as well. And we will go in depth in that one on Thursday. The rainfall should be reported for a week prior to monitoring. So if I went monitoring today, I want rainfall data for the last 7 days up until today. And I'm going to make sure I didn't miss any chats here.
Hey, sorry, this is Laura. Just a reminder, if you are a wastewater operator, please provide your name and certification number in the chat so we can get you down as having attended. And you'll also need to attend Part B of our presentation as well in order to get hours for your training. So if you can, your name and operator certification number, that's all we need, and that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And we'll probably ask for that again on Thursday, just to make sure you attended both parts of it. Jennifer would like to know how to get a recording of this presentation. Once we are done with this today, we will get this exported out as a video, and we should have them up live on our website on Thursday. And John wants to know where to find the stream adoption form. There is not a formal stream adoption form. All you got to do is either start monitoring on a stream, or whenever you create a new stream team, you put on there what stream you're adopting. And it just is the stream that you're doing your activities on. So no formal form for that one. All right, it is 12:03 and I still have a lot of people sitting here listening. I really do want to thank you guys for joining us today and being very patient as we work through just a couple technical issues there at the beginning. And I do look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. Again, if you can't be here Thursday, this is offered again in March and in April, and you can definitely take Part B during those times as well to complete that part of the credit. All right, that looks like chat is kind of wrapping up. So we are going to close this out. If you have anything else, feel free to reach out to us. Again, thank you. Have a great day.